Chapter 2, Richer, Wiser, Happier by William Green. Chapter 2 is about Sir John Templeton. So in this chapter by chapter insight summary, we are now reviewing chapter 2. So Sir John Templeton, the key insight from him was around if you are okay to be lonely, if you are willing to be lonely, and if you can develop that independent thinking mindset, and if you can go a little deeper into your spiritual meaning of life, that you can make better independent decisions. And so inner mastery and being contrarian by being alone were the two key big insights. So let's now go into the detail. So this is his photo where he's doing exercise routine by walking in this ocean where he lives very close. This is right in front of his home in the Bahamas where he lived. So he has developed deep inner mastery, and there are lots of things we can learn from him. So let's go into it. He says it's very easy and safe to belong to a tribe and to just do what other people tell us to do. But to develop your own inner conviction, to think for your own self, to challenge the status quo of what other people are doing or what the conventional wisdom is hard. To challenge, to think for yourself is hard. And you can only do that if you are trained yourself to be lonely, if you're trained yourself to take decisions, if you're trained yourself to think. And you don't really care too much about what other people think. Remember chapter 1, we looked at Monish Pobrai and how he shared with us the inner scorecard concept. Very similar. Do you really care about what other people think of you? And if you're spending most of your time in that area, then the reality is that most people don't really have time to think of you. So you're overthinking, and it doesn't matter, right? Like what you are, how you are performing, what kind of returns you are getting versus what, let's say, the index gets, right? So your inner conviction is very important. And the other key insight that I really liked was best investors like himself, Sir John Templeton, and many others that we've seen, they favor individual sports, right? And so things like running, golf, tennis, swimming, this helps them to get better at what they are doing. So it's okay if you have a trait that is unique and special to you. Honing that and going deep is actually a very good thing that we learned from Sir John Templeton. And the reason why he says it's important to be lonely is because if you want to really beat the market long term, you have to diverge from what the market is doing. So if you don't have your own conviction, and if you just follow the market, at best you can lag the market index. So if you build your inner conviction, there is a chance that you can beat the market, and that's why it's important. He was also very curious to find out the deeper meaning of life, relationship with God, as to why God created human beings. And he says a really interesting thing. He says people who are busy with some really useful work are happier than those that are idle. So this is his philosophy around retirement. He says that doing something great that you like is much more useful, not just for the person, but also to the society, than those people who want to just retire early and be idle. Because most likely that will not be the path where they'll be happier. They'll actually be less happier inside and cause misery outside. And so the spiritual inclination, contrarian belief, and going deeper, like even the foundation that the philanthropic foundation or the charity that he gives towards various big institutions, he tried to get deeper meaning as to finding out if people who prayed get well quickly or quicker than those people who don't pray. So he was deep into the spiritual aspect. He prayed regularly, went to church. And his parents actually, when he was young, instilled in him self-confidence. There was a really good example in the chapter where his parents had asked him at one point to guide them while they were traveling in their car, and he had the map. And he had to tell them, take right, take left. And at some point, he made a mistake. Their parents actually knew it, but their parents didn't correct him until he found out himself that, hey, he had made a mistake. And then he also then found out that, hey, how is he going to course correct? Those kind of situations where the training from the parents actually helped him to build that self-confidence, to build that inner conviction, to build that resiliency, to correct his decisions, to understand his mistakes, is what shaped a lot of him. He actually got better with that inner conviction because he was allowed to make mistakes. He was allowed to make mistakes while he was young. He built the confidence that he can make mistakes and recover and can come out better. So that willingness to experiment, to fail, to learn was instilled in him very early on from his childhood. And Sir John Templeton was also one of the very first pioneers who invested everywhere in the world. He didn't say, I'm going to limit myself to the United States. He actually went wherever there was the best investment available globally. And the other insight from him was he would like to buy when there is maximum pessimism. And there were many bets, and one of the biggest bet of the century that he made was right at the World War II period. And he had a lot of information edge and multiple advantages that he used to make those contrarian bets during those pessimistic times. Because if it's very low, even if it corrects half of what it corrected, even if it improves half, it actually doubles your return. So investing at the worst time actually is the biggest recipe for success, and that again requires you to be contrarian, right? Even his choice of where he lived in the Bahamas, far from New York area, right? And so he moved to a location which improved his psychology as well, right? It improved. He was detached. He was also away from the Wall Street. He was more aware of his emotion. He was less attached to the daily news or the too much of optimism or too much of pessimism. He was much more farther away. So he distanced himself, and we can see that the same pattern with Warren Buffett. He lives in Omaha, right? And so it's very important what you choose, where structure of your surrounding, how you empower yourself and your situation to help you make the best out of yourself. The other piece from him was, it is impossible to predict when the music will stop. So if there's too much optimism, it's very hard to know when it will stop, because let's say the Federal Reserve keeps printing money, or the stock market keeps going up for various reasons. It's very hard to predict when it will stop. And so don't even try. Like, that is one of the key insights. Like, if you're going to try to predict, it's going to be hard. So even he says, I don't get into that, right? And again, coming back to his spiritual aspect, he said that he has not found a single family that teethed 1/10 of their income for 10 years straight. And those from that sample who did teeth, who actually gave out money 1/10 or 10% of their income for 10 years, that they were not prosperous and happy, meaning there were zero people who were not prosperous and happy if they gave money. Right? Thing is very important. And so even he does it for himself. When he spends $1, he actually gives $10 for every dollar he spends on himself. So power of giving is another key thing that comes from Sir John Templeton. And again, the deeper inner mastery around the power of your mind and power of prayer, emotional mastery, and where you live, who you live with, what kind of routine you follow, how much faith you have developed, and how much you're able to focus on what's important to you is very important inner mastery that Sir John Templeton talks about. So positive thinking and prayer with mental strength, inner success, inner confidence, and inner mastery of inner conviction, that was a huge part towards his outer success, outer mastery, and beating the index. So that was Sir John Templeton. A lot of really interesting things to learn from him. The spiritual aspect, being able to take contrarian bets, developing your inner self, inner mastery. So that's chapter 2, Sir John Templeton. Thanks.